Now to implement the custom validation rules, I'll simply extend the sample that we've been working with so you're looking with familiar code. If I hit validate here, we've got that username is required and email address is required. So let's put in some numbers here and I get it must be a series of alpha characters. That's great. But what if I don't want to use my email address? That will be valid and that works great and fine and everything. But what if, for the sake of ribbing my wife for being so dedicated to an AOL email address, I just have me@aol.com. Well, now it's invalid because I said, please enter a non-AOL email address. And so this is a custom rule, obviously, that's not built into any browser. This demo will give you an opportunity to see how you can enforce any type of custom rule that you might have. Just like before, I have the same convention that I'm using, except I've added an item here. So now I have a validation rule that I'm looking for, which is called isAOL. It follows the same conventions of everything else. It's marked with the VMSG validation message class here, and I've also said that I initially don't want to show it to the user. But this isAOL text here will map together to a validation rule that I'll run. So let's take a look at the script, and just a quick review. This is exactly the same as what you just saw. So we've got our array that holds all the rule names. So now instead of just having all the built-in rule names, it'll have the built-in rule names plus the isAOL rule that we're looking for. We select all the validation messages on the page. All of those items are then added into the rule names array. I attach them to each one of the input elements that's not a button on the form. And I also wire up the validate function here to my validation button. Then I have a function here that allows me to implement my custom logic. I've created this function here called validate isAOL. The first thing I do is I look at the page and I get the email element and I set that aside. So I want to find out if I have a length, if there's any text in there to begin with. So I make sure that I've got a length, and then I take a look at the value, switch it to lowercase, and then find out if the text of @aol.com is present within that string. At that point, I know that I have invalid data found within my element. So then I can say element set custom validity. And this is what signals to the browser that this item is invalid. And I'm just passing in the text of invalid. So when you pass something in to set custom validity, this is what tells the browser that the input item that you're looking at based off of the instance of the element, this is the one that's invalid. And then I'm doing the same thing I did before, except it's easier to see this time because I'm not using the eval function. So I'm looking at my email rules and I'm finding the isAOL item, and then I'm removing the class of none so that I can show the proper item. Now, the next time this runs, let's say that I've changed the email address and it's no longer an AOL email. When we get into this branch, this will obviously return false because it doesn't have AOL within the text. And then I set custom validity to nothing. And that clears out the validation state found in the browser. By clearing out any entries in the validation state for this element, then basically, as long as all the internal rules pass and I'm not setting anything here, then it's considered a valid item. Now I've created this other function here just to give this page an opportunity to wrap up any extra validation rules. So I just have validate against custom rules. This isn't really that necessary for such a simple application, but again, I just wanted to show you how you could just kind of tack on rules in a list here. So the only other change that I made was that when you call validate, I'm validating against custom rules. So I'm looking at my custom rules first, and then once we've validated against all the custom rules, then it's just like we've done before and check for validity for the built-in rules. And truly everything else on the page is exactly the same. The only thing that's different is that when we call validate, we're validating against the custom rules. The custom rules include a chance to validate whether or not it's AOL. Validate AOL will look at the text to find out if we have the string of @aol.com, and if it's found there, we set custom validity and then show the error message to the user.